Vanessa Wheeler here again with Premier Guitar. Before we do anything else, don't forget to like and subscribe below. Today we're taking a look at a pedal that combines phase and envelope filtering, and it isn't just for funk music anymore. It is part of the Smalls line of the Way Huge brand. It is the Attack Vector. Let's dig in. The Attack Vector is a fun and simple and easy to use pedal. On one side we have the phase section with knobs for speed and feedback. Feedback controls the intensity of the phase signal, whereas the speed controls, as you might imagine, the frequency of the undulation. On the right-hand side we have the range and sensitivity knobs for the envelope filter. Range controls the frequency span that the envelope is allowed to sweep, whereas the sensor controls how hard or how loud the signal has to be before the envelope is engaged to span that frequency. In the middle we have a three-way switch for phase and envelope. You can use them separately, or you set it to the middle so you can use them together. In the next example, I'm using 3 different settings over 4 parts. In a lead and plucked chord part, I'm using the phase side, but I've put it in the feedback loop of my line 6 HX stomp so that I have, for the plucked chords, the phase coming after the reverb, and for the lead part, it is where it would traditionally be before the reverb. I have the phase speed increased a little bit for the part that comes behind the bridge, so there's a little extra wobble, and of course, I'm using the envelope section for the bass part, so let's take a listen to that. In the next example, the opening chords have a nice wobble going on with the phase and feedback controls on the higher side of things. I'm using a stereo reverb to make it really pop. The lead line uses a slower phase and feedback, and I've put it in the feedback loop of the HX stomp so that I can control the Attack Vector's mix level. I really like how it blends with a driven amp signal. In the bass part, I play with the sensitivity settings so that I can get a thumpy bass part and then switch to a really high frequency lead line if I play with a harder attack. I'm also using an envelope filter at very, very low settings to create a kick drum sound just by hitting the guitar in combination with an octave down sound on the HX stomp. In the next couple of examples, I wanted to showcase my favorite sides of the pedal, or favorite settings of the pedal individually, and then put them together. The first example, I'm using just the envelope filter, and I'm being very intentional about my finger pick attack. Sometimes the envelope swell or sweep is so subtle that it feels more like a volume swell, whereas when I hit it with a little harder, it really fills out the frequency spectrum. In the subsequent example, I am just using phase and a very minimal feedback, and it's very slow. In the last example, I'm using a very slow phase and minimal feedback. I've added a little bit of stereo reverb to fill it out, and finally I put the two together. So let's take a listen to that. I say the quality of the two sounds is pretty delicious. I've never messed much with phase or envelope filters because they can feel so very much about funk. And while I love that, it was fun to experiment with the envelope controls because it can EQ your signal into very dark or very bright territory as well. In that way, it's a really interactive pedal, and you can have a couple different settings depending on how you're playing. While I don't think it's going to be used for everything, you're not really meant to. These effects are more like spice, and it's like that spice that you turn to when you need a very particular thing. As such, I think it'll be a mainstay on your board and in the recording studio if you want something that sounds good and is easy to use and is tiny. So with that, I am Vanessa Wheeler with Premier Guitar, and I will see you next time.